Everyone, and welcome to our session on building data products on Snowflake using DataOps. My name is Guy Adams, CTO of DataOps.live, and I'm joined today by one of our fantastic senior solution engineers, Mark Bartlow, who's actually going to take you through some real demo stuff. So let's take a step into this, and first of all, kind of spell out, as a company, what is our vision? We have been involved in data products really from the word go, as I'll come on to. But our vision is really to change the way that the world builds and manages data products. And through the rest of this presentation, Mark's going to give you some real flesh and substance about what we mean by that. We are very excited to take questions. Please put them in the chat. We're going to make sure we leave some minutes at the end to answer those. And if any we don't get opportunities to answer at the end, our email address will be up. And also get your cameras ready, because we're going to have a QR code where you can get a free copy of DataOps for Dummies. So jumping into this, what do we see as the current state? Certainly over the last year, 18 months, in talking to customers, this is just a set of discussions that we hear time and time again. From a technical perspective, we hear people saying data is getting more and more complicated. The data is coming from more and more places, which means the quality is lower. Ingestion processes are becoming less reliable. There's a lack of transparency in terms of how data is moving around. And a really important focus for us is a poor developer experience. Data engineers are significantly disadvantaged compared to their software counterparts. That means that they can be less efficient. That means that they have less opportunities for automation. And the developer experience is very, very poor. And that kind of permeates everything. If we map those across the business, what it means is a very long time to value. We're talking about months, not weeks or days or even hours. Lack of trust. The businesses just don't trust the data, which means they go off and make decisions in other ways. There are some concerns about privacy because of the lack of transparency. Usability, the way data is structured, is very poor. But ultimately, and this is becoming an increasingly important topic in the current economic climate, it's the cost of even what should be very, very simple things is getting higher and higher, when it should be getting lower and lower. So we are looking to address these, and the industry is looking to address these via a new approach. And by new, I don't mean brand new. And we've actually been talking about this right since back in 2019. It was one of the very first things we wrote about in the book DataOps for Dummies and the True DataOps microsite, the True DataOps philosophy. But since then, the concept of data products has become significantly more prevalent. And in the press, you'll see it now talked about extensively. More and more organizations, I would say probably 80 to 90% of organizations I talk to today are either building data products today or planning to be building data products in the next year. So it represents a real quantum shift for the industry in terms of how things are managed and how they're deployed. But a lot of people still struggle with this concept of what is a data product. And I'm not going to go through these, because you can go and read the Data Mesh book by Zermatt, where a lot of this original concept came from. But the way I describe it to people is a little bit this way. Talking about building data products is not about what you're building. At the end of it, your data product might still be some combination of tables and views and procedures and data shares and things like that. And that may be something you were building even before you embarked on a data product journey. The data product is less about what you're building and more about how you are building it, how you are thinking about it, how you are managing it, how you are testing it, how you are deploying it, how you are versioning it. So what your consumers might be getting may not be radically different from what they're getting today, but the way that you're going about it is very fundamentally different. And let's not forget that so much of what we're trying to build into data products is what's come from the software world. We're trying to take the way that the software world moved from building your standalone libraries and big monoliths into building decomposed software products. And we're trying to take the data world in the same direction. In fact, Sanjeev's got a nice description of this, which again, it's encapsulating it's the trust, it's the features that solve business problems. Measurable value is a really important thing. And that a lot of people struggle with this. What is the scope of a data product? If you're building a data product and it doesn't have defined measurable value, you've almost certainly scoped it wrong. And a really important for this is the data product owner. That's one thing that, if you move from a data project world where you have a project manager for a period of time and then they move on to something else, a data product owner owns a data product for its entire life cycle, from the original first MVP right the way through to the retirement of that data product. So if we take those concepts of data product, how does DataOps fit in? What is the relevance here? So the first thing we need to think about is automating the build and deployment of data products. And when we talk about frequency, we don't want to be releasing these things every quarter, every month, every week, or to some extent every day. We want to be releasing these multiple times a day if there are multiple updates every day. And the only way we're going to get to anything even close to that is that we've got to fully automate the build and the deployment of the data products. And that's going to dramatically reduce the time to build them, to manage them, to update them, to peer review them, and to find and fix issues in them. One of the things that people are really starting to get their heads around now, certainly as a requirement, if not as a solution, or haven't found a solution for yet, is version controlling. There will come a time, no matter how careful you are with your data product, first of all, you should be doing automated backwards compatibility testing. You should know before you deploy a data product, is it going to break something for my downstream consumers? And it should prevent you from deploying that. So that's kind of step one. But there will then come a time when, in order to do the right thing for your business, in order to do the right thing for your data, you have to make a breaking change. And how do you do that without breaking things for your consumers? Well, the software world solved this many, many years ago for APIs, and they said, well, simply we'll version it. When we have to break version 1 of the API, we'll create version 2, we'll release version 2 alongside version 1, we'll allow the two to run concurrently for some period of time, we'll give our users notice that version 1 is going to be end of life on a particular date, we'll have the telemetry and the monitoring in place to monitor how the usage of version 1 is dropping off and the usage of version 2 is improving. But ultimately, it comes down to the ability of thinking not just about a data product as a single thing, but as something that has multiple versions that can be deployed independently. And that's a huge area we're seeing a lot of time and effort spent on at the moment. But one of those really important things about data product is discoverability. You can build the best data products in the world. If the rest of your organization is not using it, you may as well not have bothered. And the way to communicate that, the way to get the information about your data products to your business users is through the data catalog. And that's going to be part of what Mark shows later, is not just the data product process, but how do you publish that every time you make a change to the data product? How do you publish that to your data catalog? As we get to scale, we're going to see we don't just have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 data products, but we've got 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. How do we coordinate those releases and dependencies? We might have a data product that doesn't just run every hour or every 30 minutes or whatever based on ingesting some data. We might have a data product that depends on other data products. So how do we refresh this data product based on rules for other data products? Update D when A and B and C have updated, for example. And let's not lose sight, again, in the current economic climate, cost is critically important. One of the great things about building and designing around data products is it gives you a base entity to talk about cost. What is the cost of building a data product every month? What is the actual dollar cost of it? And then for that data product, because it's a self-contained thing with real value, what is the value to the business? And once I've got those two things, I can actually calculate an ROI. I can say, what is it costing me to build my data product? What value is it delivering to the business? If that ROI doesn't stack up, we should stop updating it, we should stop building the data product, or we should do something to modify the cost profile. We should, there are things that we can do to make it cheaper to deploy the data product, or we need to do something to it to add more value. But those discussions can't happen until the data product owners get visibility of this fundamental information. And ultimately, all of this requires, as part of automation, ultimately to get confidence requires full automated testing. There is no one out there with a software product that's releasing it multiple times a week or even multiple times a day that would conceive of doing that without a complete suite of automated testing. So automated testing underpins the ability to constantly make changes quickly, deploy changes quickly, respond to the business request quickly without having to do manual test cycles. And that's really what DataOps does. That's what DataOps captures, is all of those things in a single platform. We can build faster, we can test thoroughly, we can deploy easily, and then we can monitor what's going on and govern that with confidence. And if we crack that, and for organizations that have cracked that, the results are pretty remarkable. And to give you one reference point from one of our customers, so in less than 18 months of following this approach with DataOps.live, Roche Pharmaceuticals went from their MVP time for building a data product was 6 to 8 months. It dropped to 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks to get a full data product out the door. They're running this. They're following a full data mesh, so they're running this across different data product teams. They've got 40 teams. They've got well over 50 data products now being deployed. But to me, in many ways, the most impressive statistic here is before this approach, they were doing 1 release per quarter. So you think about what that means from a manual perspective. You think about what that means in terms of responsiveness to business requirements. You miss the release window. Best case scenario, you get your change in 3 months. They're now doing, I would say, close to 200. This is a slightly old slide. And they're doing close to 200 releases every single month. That's multiple releases a day. And that means as a business user with an important requirement, not only do I get it done quickly, but I get to see the results in production quickly. And ultimately, that comes together to over 40 million of cost savings by their own estimation. And as Paul Rankin, who's a great friend of ours, said, if there's one tool that's going to change your life forever, it's DataOps.live, and that's because it's become the fundamental platform they use for all of this automation, building, deploying of data products. So that's kind of enough from me. What I want to do now is turn over to Mark and give him an opportunity to actually show you what some of this looks like in practice. So Mark, let me give you the screen share.
All right, let's get started. Does everything look good from your side, Guy?
Yeah, I can see your screen great.
Great. So for this demo, we're going to show how DataOps.live could promote and enhance the collaboration between 3 different groups. As Guy mentioned in the presentation, the central theme is going to be a data product owner. So instead of a project where you'd have a project manager or whatnot, this will be a data product owner, and they're going to start by viewing the data product asset in a catalog. In this case, it's going to be Calibra. They'll quickly notice the need for a change to the data product, and they'll collaborate with a data engineer. The data engineer will make that change based on the instructions of the data product owner, and then they will in turn collaborate with a release manager to give another set of eyes on the change. They'll quickly make that change, and it'll end back in the business side with the data product owner viewing that change from the catalog, and that will highlight not only the whole DataOps.live platform for automating, orchestrating, and observing the change, but also how it integrates with the catalog. So I'm going to start as the data product owner, and I'm going to view the data product that I'm having question here. And you can see all the information that was updated from this prior DataOps.live pipeline run. And one thing I noticed right off the bat is that at least 100% of the data sets are validated, meaning the regression tests and the automated tests, or the service level objectives, if you will, worked fine. But I'm going to look deeper into this in the diagram, and I'm going to see that there's a little bit of non-conformance going on here. We want to always have our column names 1 words or 2 words, and this one is 4 words. So the data engineer is going to have to make that change from number of line items to item count. I'm going to look a little bit deeper into this and see that 100% of the SLOs are validated. But again, that number of line item columns was tested for not null, and same with the greater than 0, the number of line items. So a change has to be made here. You can also look at the glossary and see if this is even in the glossary. And nope, not in the glossary. So 2 changes have to be made here for our data engineer. So let's look at again at a little bit more of the lineage of how this was created with DataOps.live. And I'll just go into the actual pipeline that was run to generate this data product. And you could see, I could see the lineage and the reference of the data pipeline that created this data product and that pushed it to actually the Calibra catalog. And you could see, I could observe in the setup of Snowflake that it was my production database, a Calibra prod. So that looks good. That's all good. And I could also see that my automated tests, that my regression tests were run successfully, but it was on the bad column name, number of line items. So again, need to change that to item count, but at least everything passed in. The key is the integration. I could see that the catalog sync was successful. So that result of that pipeline that was executed did push the data right from DataOps.live into the catalog to enhance that collaboration with the data product owner. And you could see that was run about 19 hours ago. Okay, so let's make the change. I'm going to create an issue for the data engineer and say, change that column name to from number of line items to item count. Now I'm going to switch into the data engineer role. As a data engineer, I'll see this request for a change, and it'll be explained. Please change the column name. Got it. Remember our policy? Yeah, I know. I did it bad again. And also add this glossary to the glossary with the description, item, ordered item count. And great, I know exactly what to do, heck, exactly, and how easily and quickly I could do it. In DataOps.live, I'm just going to say starting now, actually. And then we'll get this thing going, and you'll see the benefits of DataOps.live. So I'm starting now. So first secret sauce. Instead of doing this with manual methods like SQL statements and manual manipulation of the environment, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to create a new feature branch for my environment, and I'll call it column name change and create that branch. What this does is this creates that sandbox for me, that branch for me to do my testing. And so I won't interfere with anybody else. And many data engineers, developers can work on changes at the same time without interfering with each other. And this is part of the way Roche and our other customers get their speed, because they could turn this around just like they would turn around software changes. And that feature branch I created, in turn, started a pipeline that's building out my sandbox environment. And it's featuring the creation of a zero copy clone of the data, meaning that not only is the configuration change I'm making going to work like software, but it's also going to include the data. And you can see I'm testing the sources, building the models, testing the models, and you can see there's my non-conformance test, but at least it worked. So I know I don't have a problem there. Then finally generating the docs and the ability to tear down to my environment. So now let's just make that change now. Let's go in and see what it's going to look like here. So here's my production database. There's my orders table. There's the non-conformance, but here's the zero copy clone that I created as part of the pipeline. And I know I need to make my change here, right there. So yeah, let's go and do it. And this is what is going to change a data engineer's life using DataOps.live life forever. Because I'm going to go into our development environment here, and you could see I've staged the configuration for the data product, and that's a declarative configuration where it's being generated by these SQL statements. And here's my service level objectives, the automated tests, if you will. And I made the change from number of line items to item count in this configuration. I've changed the SQL that generates the data product orders. You can see it's derived from the sample orders in the line item tables, and there's my change. Then finally, the configuration that goes for the automated tests and putting this description in the glossary. Ordered item count, that's going to be a business term that a business person could self-serve and view this data product. And there, my automated test is simple as configuring the tests for this column change. So again, the next thing I'm going to do that's going to change the life of a data engineer forever is I'm going to unit test this right in line. I don't have to run any partial pipelines or full pipelines that could take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. I'm going to run it right here, and you could see it completed successfully. So I know that that model and that change is going to work in my environment. And I could also run the tests too, those configured tests for not null and greater than zero. And you could see, beautiful, they've run successfully. So now I could get right to the task at hand. I could see the changes I'm making to each of the configurations, the data product, the actual model, column change, and the glossary entry and the automated tests. And I could go in now and commit that change and say, now run this pipeline, same pipeline to the feature branch, but now include the change. And what I should see when I get to the testing of the models is I should see my change is observable now. And it is there, and it passed, and we're off and running. So we've made that change, and you could see the value of CI/CD and the iterative process that's enabled by DataOps.live while collaborating with the business and with the release manager. So now I'm going to get this merge request created. I'm going to paste this in here, assign it to the release manager, and say, okay, do the merge request. Now I am the release manager. And as a release manager, I'm the second set of eyes reviewing the changes. So what I normally do is make sure the changes are adhering to what the business wants. So far, they all look really good. And I could see the automated tests, the glossary entry. I'm going to fast forward this thing and look at the pipelines to make sure there are no issues here. Say, hey, let's get this thing turned around. Looks good. Looks great. The auditability, record of every change, approve it, merge it. Now we're running the pipeline But now this change is building out that production environment, just the way you would build out a cloud environment. Think of CloudFormation, Terraform, whatever. I'm building that out now for my production environment. And this is a way we could do things like versioning and that quick CI/CD. Now, when you look at the test of the models, should be all done, generate the docs there. And now finally, let's see if the Calibra catalog updates correctly. And there it is. So I've completed that change and pushed it to Calibra. The only thing to do now is, and the data product owner will get notified, is go back into Calibra, take a look and see how that change manifested itself. If I look in the catalog, I could see it was pushed. You notice subtly that that's a different pipeline number. All the tests are valid, but let's look at the diagram again here. And now I see that change is there. So that's beautiful. That's exactly what I wanted. And I could see that the validated tests reflect item count. That's great. Also, now let's see if we got the glossary right. There it is in the glossary with a business description. So that's discoverable by the business, and that further enhances the collaboration between all parties here. And finally, let's just look at the lineage of the latest run we did here. This should be just literally minutes ago. And that's the whole environment, including, now I could see the sync to Calibra, data loaded. And with that, that's an example of how we could use DataOps.live to quickly create, manage, and change data products in Snowflake while balancing agility and governance. And with that, I'll send it back to you, Guy.
Superb. Thank you very much, Mark. Let me pull my screen share back up. Okay, and I think it's worth just spending 30 seconds. The use case that Mark had was relatively simple. We need to change a column name, add a glossary term, update some tests. But the point is that feature could be that request could be as simple as the one that Mark did. It could be adding some new transformations. It could be ingesting a whole new data source. It could be building a whole new data product. The point is that every feature in a DataOps environment gets developed the same way. You start out with your business request, you create your feature branch, you make your changes, you iterate through your changes as many times as you like. And don't forget, this feature branch environment is still a full environment inside Snowflake. So one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand about Agile is Agile is all about developing quickly. Agile is all about getting what your stakeholders need quickly. Very often what your stakeholders ask you for initially is not what they want. And the only way to get to what they want is to develop what they've asked for and then show it to them and then get their feedback and iterate on that. So one of the big advantages of this approach is it gives you this, when you think you finish the feature or you think you finish what the stakeholder asked for, you can show it to them and say, hey, here's an environment inside Snowflake that's built exactly per production, but with your change in it, are you happy with it? If not, make a change, iterate through it. And the beauty of this, and Mark showed how quick it was, is that you can have an engineer and a stakeholder sat around the same screen, sat on the same Zoom call, and make a change, deploy it, stakeholder sees the result, feedback, make a change, deploy it, see the result. And you can go around that loop every couple of minutes. So you can get incredibly fast feedback. And ultimately, what does that mean? It means you get what the stakeholder's happier, and the stakeholder's happier in a time measured in hours rather than weeks and months with a traditional approach. So that importance of developing those feature branches, iterating on them is hugely important. And then of course we merge back. Now in the demo, Mark took some a slightly quicker approach here, but typically you'd go from a feature branch into an integration environment like dev. You'd make sure your change works with other people's changes. Then you'd go from dev to QA, which is your sort of pre-production environment, and then ultimately into prod. One of the other points to really bear in mind here with this declarative approach, there's a couple of questions that have come up about this, is that we always talk about deploying. We always talk about deploying new changes, deploying new features, but a really important part of a DataOps approach is what happens when something goes wrong. With your automated testing, you're going to minimize the chance of something getting into production that shouldn't be there. But it's not an if, it's a when. It will happen eventually. And so because we've managed this change in this really well-governed way, if you do get something into production and suddenly the business starts screaming, it's simple. You revert that previous commit out of the production branch, you rerun the pipeline, and it will revert all of the configuration and code and structure back to its previous state. So following this development and deployment approach doesn't just allow you to get changes out there very quickly, it also gives you an extremely fast, reliable, and bulletproof way of reverting any changes that accidentally get out there that people don't want.
Yeah, so Guy, I think there's some questions. If we want to answer the questions now as we do this here, I think we could pretty easily answer these.
Absolutely. So, well, one of the questions that came up is, does this replace Terraform? And the simple answer is yes. Terraform Terraform as a philosophy is fantastic. You just define what you want the world to look like, and every time you run it, it will look at what the world is, it will look at what the world should be, and it will resolve any differences. But specifically with Terraform, there's a lot of challenges with Terraform in a database world. For example, you've got to define all your dependencies. Terraform will happily go ahead and try and create a table in a schema that doesn't exist yet, or try and create a column, add a column to a table that doesn't exist yet, and so on. So you've got to manage all those dependencies yourself. Is the first problem. The second problem is Terraform has this concept of like every object is one operation. So if I've got 10,000 grants defined, which is not a big project, every time I run a pipeline, it's got to do 10,000 operations to check what grants exist. And then if I've got to apply them, it's got to do 10,000 operations to apply them. Now, and it will do each of those 20,000 operations, it will do them one at a time. We know that in a database, particularly Snowflake, I can go and find all the grants with a single command against the information schema. So I can replace 10,000 actions that Terraform has to do one at a time with one single operation. And when we come to apply grants, we know that we can do these in bulk, we can do these in parallel. So the principles of Terraform are very good, but the way that Terraform actually manages things like zero copy clone, the way it manages large object counts like grants and tags really doesn't work inside Snowflake when you get to any sort of meaningful scale.
Yeah. So the next one is, so the pipelines persist. Yeah. How do we manage hundreds of pipelines or zero cost copies of Snowflake data, or do we really care since it's Dev or Sandbox? It's kind of pointing towards your last statement there. What we do have built into the product is the ability to tear down the feature branch zero copy clone so it doesn't clutter up the environment. And I'm a big proponent of not cluttering up the environment. And that's why we do the sandbox, because it is your own sandbox. And after that runs and you merge, you just go in and say, tear down the Snowflake environment that removes that zero copy clone. And you could delete the branch then if you want to. If you want to keep it for history, you can, but you don't have to once it's merged. Think of it very much like software. So it isn't a big deal because those zero copy clones are close to ephemeral, meaning they should turn around and be removed very quickly as you iterate through your testing. So I don't think that's a problem at all. Guy, I think there's another question there. Is this a hierarchical process? I'll let you answer that one.
So yeah, I'm not 100% sure what it means by a hierarchical process, but I'll give you one answer to the question. If you think about an organization at scale, you're going to have a hierarchical structure of your data and your data product. So if you're an organization like Roche with 50 or 60 different data products, if you just have 50 or 60 completely independent things, there's going to be a massive amount of repetition. And you think across an organization, you don't want 30, 40 teams all defining what profit looks like, or what a customer definition looks like, and what or even what the guardrails and security policies are. So one of the really important things about DataOps is this concept of federated governance. You can have a central team, a center of excellence team, or a central DataOps team who define reusable components, governance policies, guardrails, and those then get inherited into all of the individual domains, into all of the individual data products. So hierarchical in that sense, absolutely, you can define central things and reuse them. But you can also even do things like define infrastructure centrally. So we've got a customer that defines every department has 3 databases, this many schemas, this many roles, this many virtual warehouses, this many resource monitors, and then they said, oh, we want to create a new warehouse for all the departments to run data science workloads on. So they went to one central file. They added 4 or 5 lines of YAML, which is how you define this infrastructure in a declarative way. And within an hour, 35 different departments had their own data science warehouse because they defined it in one place, inherited it into all these projects, and then it was manifested 35 different times. So that concept of federation, that concept of reusability and inheritance is hugely important. It doesn't matter if you've got a company with one department and one team, that's straightforward. But as soon as you start getting into multiple projects, multiple teams, an organization, a big enterprise, this concept of federation becomes critically important to avoid duplication, to avoid mistakes, to avoid people not following central security policies and guardrails and things like that.
All right, with that, Guy, I think this slide wraps up everything.
Yep, I think that just summarizes the benefits. It releases time to value, productivity, and downtime. And these are the takeaways. Come and see us at the virtual booth. Email us, and I promised a QR code. If you scan that code, you can get a free copy of the DataOps for Dummies book, which I strongly recommend. and feedback on the book welcome. And with that, I think we're done. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
For the rest of your day, take care.
Bye.
Bye.